Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm David Kerr from Lansing in Michigan, and these are your latest news headlines from around the world. Pope Francis seemed to break down in tears while praying for peace in Ukraine on Thursday. The Holy Father was attending the annual ceremony in Rome to celebrate the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. That takes place at the city's Column of the Immaculate Conception. This year, the Pope focused his prayers on peace in the world, and particularly for peace in, quote, martyred Ukraine. Earlier, the Holy Father prayed before the Marian icon of Salus Populi Romani in the Basilica of St. Mary Major. The icon of the Blessed Virgin is traditionally regarded as protecting the people of Rome, including from deadly plague in the 6th century. Meanwhile, during the Angelus, upon the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Pope Francis invited all Christians to entrust themselves to Our Lady. The US House of Representatives has voted to pass the Respect for Marriage Act on Thursday by 258 votes to 169. All those who voted against were Republicans, although 39 Republicans voted for the legislation, along with 219 Democrats. The bill, which would repeal the 1996 Defence of Marriage Act, recognises so-called same-sex marriage on a federal level. The law has drawn criticism from many Catholic leaders, including the bishops of the United States, for not providing strong enough protections for those who advocate that marriage is between one man and one woman. It will now be sent to President Joe Biden's desk for legislative signature. Iran has announced the first execution of a protester convicted over the recent anti-government unrest. Mohsen Shekari was hanged on Thursday morning after being found guilty by a revolutionary court of, quote, enmity against God. Mr. Shekari was accused of being a rioter who blocked the main road in the capital city of Tehran in September, and also of wounding a member of the military with a machete. Prior to being executed, the activist said he had been convicted after a show trial without any due process. The Iranian judiciary has so far announced that at least 11 others have been sentenced to death by revolutionary courts on charges of enmity against God or corruption on earth in connection with the protests. Southwest Airlines has been ordered to reinstate a flight attendant after a jury found that she was wrongfully fired for expressing her pro-life beliefs. The decision in favour of flight attendant Charlene Carter was made by a federal judge in Texas. Bags fly free with Southwest, but free speech didn't fly at all with Southwest in this case, said Judge Brantley Starr upon handing down his decision. Judge Starr also ordered the airline and the airline union to pay compensatory and punitive damages. The company and the union are now prohibited by the ruling from treating Southwest flight attendants unfairly because of their religious practices or views, including those expressed in social media and those relating to abortion. An attack upon two villages in the Democratic Republic of Congo has left at least 131 civilians dead. A report from the United Nations claims that the massacre in the villages of Kashishi and Bambo during late November appeared to be a reprisal for a government assault upon rebel groups. Both the UN and the Congolese government are blaming the massacre on the M23 rebel group. They, however, reject responsibility, calling the allegations baseless. In the report, the UN says that 102 men, 17 women and 12 children were executed by M23 as part of reprisals against the civilian population. An investigation into the atrocity has already been opened by the country's Attorney General. Meanwhile, the growing violence in South Sudan's Upper Nile state has forced at least 20,000 people to evacuate their homes. That's according to a report by the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UN Human Rights Council. Over the past 4 months, hundreds of thousands of people have fled their homes due to clashes between armed factions. At least 75% of those displaced are women and children, the report reveals. In August, violence broke out in the Upper Nile village of Tonga. Since then, violence has spread to neighbouring regions. The Holy See's prefect of the Dicastery for the Services of Charity, Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, has visited the flood-hit town of Casamicciola Terme on Italy's Ischia Island in the Gulf of Naples on December the 8th. Floods wreaked havoc on the island on November the 26th, claiming 12 lives and displacing hundreds of people. On Wednesday, the residents of the town observed a day of mourning as the requiem masses for the victims were held. Cardinal Krajewski said he was sharing the sorrow, adding that pain cannot be taken away. However, he said it can be borne together. In a statement, the Cardinal said that Pope Francis expresses his grief over the tragedy. He also gifted a rosary blessed by Pope Francis to each of the bereaved families. A Catholic parish in Michigan has decided to take legal action in a bid to protect the constitutional right of all Catholic institutions in the state to freely live and teach the Catholic faith. The move by St. Joseph Parish in the town of St. John's in the Diocese of Lansing comes in response to a recent ruling by Michigan's Supreme Court, which redefined the term sex discrimination in the state's Civil Rights Act to include claims of discrimination based upon sexual orientation or gender identity, but without any exemption for religious organisations such as the parish of St. Joseph. Hence, the local parish has now taken legal action to ensure their right to religious liberty as enshrined in the First Amendment of the US Constitution. The Bishop of Oyo Diocese in Nigeria is calling upon the government of the West African nation to invest in interfaith dialogue to ward off what he describes as unnecessary suspicion and animosity ahead of the country's general election in February 2023. In his address to the Ecumenism Interreligious Commission Annual Symposium of Oyo Diocese, Bishop Emmanuel Adetoyese Badejo advocated for value-based elections, which he said can be achieved through interfaith dialogue. Festive lights were projected onto the facade of St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney in Australia on Thursday as the local diocese and city prepare for Christmas. Various Advent events are taking place at the cathedral from December the 8th to December the 25th, including light shows, live performances, market stalls, nativity scenes and Christmas trees, with the cathedral and the crypt open for private prayer. The proceeds from this year's Christmas at the Cathedral celebrations will be used to support flood victims in New South Wales. Meanwhile, it's been announced that a public Day of the Unborn Child will take place in Sydney on March the 26th, 2023. The day is organised by the Life and Family Institute of Sydney and will begin with Holy Mass celebrated at St Mary's Cathedral. It will then be followed by a procession led by Archbishop Anthony Fisher. The Population Research Institute's Steve Mosher will then address a gathering at Parliament House. There will then be benediction at the cathedral after the procession. The event coincides with the Feast of the Annunciation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which is internationally recognised as a Day of the Unborn Child. Finally, St Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, which was destroyed in the 9/11 terror attacks on the World Trade Center in New York in 2001, has finally reopened. The reopening took place on December the 6th, the Feast of St Nicholas. Over the past 22 years, the rebuilding process of the church has had to overcome financial setbacks and building delays. The new church is built in an elevated park overlooking the World Trade Center's Memorial Plaza. Well, that's your latest headlines for now. Do join us for more tomorrow. You can also join us at swnews.org for news updates. Shalom.